The battlefield was nothing but fire and dust. The sky had turned a strange orange, filled with smoke that choked the air. All around, the ground trembled with distant explosions. Machines burned. Voices faded. And through it all, Sarai stumbled forward, her boots dragging through the mud. She was a medic of the Neural Dominion, trained to save lives, but now she could hardly save her own. Her lungs burned with every breath. Her silver skin, once bright and shining like liquid metal, was now pale and cracked. The soft glow in her veins dimmed with every step. 3 days of fighting, no rest, no food. Her body had reached its limit, but she kept moving because she had to. Somewhere out there, maybe one of her squad mates was still alive. Maybe someone still needed her. "Come on, Sarai," she whispered to herself. Her voice trembled. Just a little more, but her knees gave way. She fell hard onto the cold ground, her medical kit sliding from her grip. The sound of its metal latch opening echoed faintly. Small vials rolled away, spilling their last drops of glowing serum into the dirt. Sarai reached for one, her fingers shaking, but she couldn't even close her hand around it. The air was too heavy. The world was spinning. Her head dropped against her arm and her vision blurred. Around her, the battlefield stretched silent and endless, smoke rising like ghosts into the dying sky. For a long time, she just lay there, listening to her own heartbeat fading in her ears. She thought about her homeworld, about the shimmering oceans of Nirel, about the wind that carried the songs of her people. She wanted to hear those songs again. But here, there was only the sound of distant thunder and her own shallow breathing. "Is this it?" she thought weakly. "Is this where I end?" Her eyes fluttered shut. Darkness began to creep in. But then, footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps crunching through ash and gravel. Her tired eyes opened just a little. She saw a shadow moving through the smoke. A tall shape, broad shoulders, a human silhouette. Her heart skipped in fear. Humans were the enemy. They had come to this planet as conquerors, ruthless and merciless. Her people had lost entire colonies to them. She tried to move, tried to reach for her sidearm, but her arm wouldn't respond. The figure drew closer until she could see him clearly through the haze. A man, dust-covered, his uniform torn, his face smeared with blood and dirt. His eyes were human brown, sharp but calm. He wasn't holding a weapon. He knelt beside her slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice deep and rough. "You're still breathing." Sarai blinked at him, confused. "Why, are you here?" Her voice cracked, weak and dry. He looked at her wounds, frowning. "You're hurt bad. Don't touch me," she whispered, but there was no strength in it. He ignored the warning and reached into his pack. His hands were rough but gentle. He pulled out a small white device, a human medical patch, and pressed it against her shoulder. She winced, expecting pain. Instead, warmth spread through her veins, a soft pulse like sunlight melting through ice. Her breathing steadied. Her vision cleared a little. What did you do?" she asked in disbelief. "Just helping," he said simply. His tone was kind, almost apologetic. "You're gonna be okay." Sarai didn't understand. Humans didn't help Nirel soldiers. They captured them. They experimented on them. But this man, he was healing her. Why? She managed to whisper. "We're enemies." He glanced at the distant smoke, his jaw tightening. "Not right now, we're not." She wanted to argue, but her eyelids were growing heavy again. The warmth from his touch was spreading deeper, calming her pain. For the first time in days, her body wasn't trembling. Her thoughts began to fade into softness. The man adjusted her position gently, laying her head on a folded jacket. "Don't move. I'll keep you safe for now." As her eyes finally closed, Sarai's last thought before sleep was not of war, not of fear, but of confusion. Why would an enemy risk himself for her? Why did his voice sound like safety? The battlefield remained silent, broken only by the faint crackle of fire and the human's quiet sigh as he looked over her fragile form. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story. But something in him refused to walk away. He looked up at the sky, whispering softly to himself. Not today. No one dies alone today. And beside the fallen alien medic, he stayed. When Sarai woke again, the world was quieter. The fire from the wreckage had burned out, leaving only gray smoke curling into the orange sky. Her body felt strange, still sore, but lighter somehow. She could breathe without pain. The deep ache in her chest had softened, and the constant ringing in her ears was gone. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she turned her head and froze. A human sat nearby. He was leaning against a broken engine, his rifle set aside beside him. His face was tired, smudged with dirt and blood, yet his eyes remained alert, scanning the horizon. A faint wind lifted the torn edge of his jacket. His name, she remembered faintly. Corin, that's what he had said before she blacked out. Sarai's first instinct was to crawl away, but her arms gave out before she could move. The sound caught his attention. He turned his head slowly, meeting her frightened eyes. "Hey," he said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're awake." Her throat was dry. "You're human," he nodded. "Last I checked, you shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Your kind and mine. We're at war." "I know," Corin said quietly. "But wars don't matter much when you're both trying to stay alive." She didn't answer. She couldn't understand him. Humans were supposed to be brutal, unfeeling. Yet here he was, calm, patient, offering her water from a metal canteen. She hesitated, staring at it suspiciously. "It's clean," he assured her. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't still be breathing." The blunt honesty startled her. Against her better judgment, she took the canteen and drank. The water was warm and metallic, but it felt like life itself. "Better?" he asked. She nodded slowly, lowering her gaze. "Why help me? I am your enemy." Corin didn't answer right away. He picked up a small stick and poked at the ashes near the fire pit. "Because I've seen enough dying," he said finally. "Too many humans, too many aliens. I'm tired of watching people fall when I could do something about it." Sarai studied him carefully. His uniform bore no rank insignia. Maybe it had been torn off. His hands were rough but not cruel. There was something heavy in his voice, something that came from pain, not pride. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I didn't need to," he replied. "You were hurt." That was enough. The simplicity of his words struck her harder than any weapon. Her people had taught her that humans were monsters who took pleasure in destruction, but this man's eyes told a different story. There was weariness there, yes, but also warmth. Sarai tried to sit up, but her head spun. Corin moved instantly, steadying her shoulder. "Easy. You're not ready to stand yet." His touch was gentle, almost hesitant, as if he feared breaking her. She felt the heat of his hand through her armor, steady, human warmth. It was strange how something so simple could make her heartbeat quicken. "You risked yourself," she murmured. "You should have left me." "Maybe," he said, giving a small smile. "But then I wouldn't be able to live with myself." A quiet moment passed between them. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of distant gunfire. Both of them looked toward it, their expressions hardening. The war hadn't ended. It was still out there, waiting, consuming everything. Sarai turned back to him. "When your soldiers find me, they'll kill me." He met her eyes. "Then they won't find you." She didn't know whether to feel comforted or terrified. His kindness was dangerous. It could mean her salvation or her doom. But something deep inside her wanted to trust him, even if it made no sense. Corin tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped it around her arm where a deep gash ran along her skin. His movements were careful and deliberate. "You heal fast," he said. "My kind regenerate slower when we're weak," she replied softly. "But whatever you did earlier, it helped." "Medical patch," he said. "Human tech. Not fancy like yours, but it works." Sarai smiled faintly, surprising herself. "Maybe your kind isn't as primitive as we thought." He chuckled under his breath. "And maybe yours isn't as heartless as we were told." The words lingered in the air, warm and uncertain. For the first time, Sarai didn't see a soldier before her. She saw a person, wounded, tired, yet still trying to do good in a world that had forgotten what goodness meant. As the sun sank beyond the wreckage, painting the sky in soft red, Sarai leaned her head back and whispered, maybe the stories were wrong." Corin looked at her, his voice quiet and honest. "Yes, maybe they were." And for a fleeting moment, amid all the ruins of war, two enemies found something rare. Peace, fragile but real. The night fell slowly over the wasteland, turning the sky into a blanket of dark blue dusted with faint stars. The fires of battle were far away now. Only the cold wind and silence remained. Sarai sat close to the small campfire Corin had built, her arms wrapped around herself. The warmth felt strange against her alien skin, but comforting all the same. Corin sat across from her, patching up his torn glove with a thin wire. His movements were quiet and focused. Every so often he glanced at her as if to make sure she was still okay. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like the pause between two heartbeats. Sarai's body was still weak, but the sharp pain in her muscles had faded. The human medical patch he used was still glowing faintly against her shoulder, and her breathing had become easier. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt stuck somewhere between pride and confusion. After a while, Corin broke the silence. "You should rest. You lost a lot of blood." "I've rested enough," she said softly. "If I rest any more, I'll never move again." He smiled faintly. "You sound stubborn. Guess that's what kept you alive." She looked down at the dirt, tracing patterns with her clawed fingers. "I didn't stay alive for myself. I'm a medic. I was supposed to save others. But my whole unit—" She stopped, her voice cracking. "They're gone." Corin didn't speak right away. He just stared at the fire, his jaw tightening. "Yeah," he said after a long moment. "I know that feeling." Sarai looked up at him. "You lost people too?" He nodded slowly. "My squad. We were cut off when the lines shifted. I tried to call for help, but it was too late. They were gone before I even realized I was alone." Something in his voice, tired, hollow, honest, made her chest ache. He wasn't just another soldier. He was someone carrying a mountain of loss just like her. The wind blew softly through the broken metal around them, making a faint whistling sound. Sarai hugged her knees closer. "Maybe that's what war is," she whispered. "A place where no one wins and everyone ends up alone." Corin poked at the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. "Maybe, but as long as someone's still standing, it's not over." She studied him carefully. There was no arrogance in his tone, no heroic pride, just quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving when you didn't want to anymore. It was strange, but his presence made her feel less afraid of the darkness around them. "You humans," she began, then hesitated. "We were told you fight without mercy, that you burn everything you touch." He gave a small, tired laugh. "We do that sometimes. We're not proud of it, but not all of us want war." Sarai looked at him closely. "Then why fight?" He shrugged. "Sometimes we don't get to choose who we fight for, but we can still choose who we save." His words lingered in the air, warm and quiet like the firelight. Sarai looked away, hiding the sudden sting in her eyes. For so long she had believed humans were monsters, yet this one spoke like a healer, not a killer. Corin noticed the tremor in her shoulders. Without a word, he reached into his pack and pulled out a thin silver blanket. He tossed it gently toward her. "Here, it'll help with the cold." She caught it awkwardly, staring at it in surprise. "You're giving this to me?" "You need it more than I do," he said simply. For a few moments, she just held the blanket in her hands, unsure what to say. Then she draped it over herself. The warmth spread quickly, and she closed her eyes with a quiet sigh. "Thank you," she whispered. Corin leaned back against a rock, his eyes half closed. "Don't mention it, just don't collapse on me again, all right? You scared the hell out of me." That made her smile for the first time since the battle began. It was small, fragile, but real. "I'll try not to." The night deepened. The fire crackled softly. For the first time in many nights, Sarai felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. She watched Corin's face in the flickering firelight. He looked exhausted, older than his years, yet peaceful somehow. There was something in his expression she didn't understand. Kindness mixed with sadness, like he was still mourning a world that no longer existed. Without realizing it, she whispered, "Why did you save me, really?" His eyes opened and he met her gaze. "Because no one deserves to die alone," he said quietly. "Not even an enemy." Those words hit her like a pulse of light. They sank deep into her heart where no weapon could reach. Sarai turned her face toward the fire again, blinking back tears she didn't understand. The human beside her didn't speak again. He didn't need to. In the silence of the ruined battlefield, two lost souls, one human, one alien, sat together under the same dark sky. And for the first time, Sarai began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth saving in this universe. The next morning came quietly. The sun rose weakly through the gray clouds, painting the ruins in shades of gold and ash. Smoke still floated in the air, but the silence was peaceful. Too peaceful for a world that had known nothing but chaos. Sarai woke to the sound of crackling fire. The warmth of the blanket still covered her shoulders. She blinked, her body heavy but calm. Corin was sitting nearby, sharpening a small metal knife with slow, steady motions. His face looked softer in daylight. He was still worn and tired, but his eyes no longer carried that hard edge of survival. When he noticed her awake, he gave a small nod. "Morning." "You slept through the night," Sarai rubbed her eyes. "I haven't done that in weeks." "That's good," he said quietly. "Means you're healing." She studied him for a moment. He had given her food, water, warmth, and even protection. Yet he had asked for nothing in return. No threats, no conditions. It made her uneasy, but also strangely grateful. "Corin," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You don't have to stay with me. If your people find us together, they'll think you've gone rogue." He didn't stop sharpening the knife. "They already think that," he said simply. "What do you mean?" He set the knife down, staring into the fire for a long moment. His voice grew quieter. "I was supposed to pull out after my squad was hit. Command gave the order to retreat, but..." He hesitated, jaw tightening. "I couldn't. I stayed behind to look for them. By the time I found what was left, the transport was gone. They marked me as missing or dead." Sarai watched him carefully. There was something in his tone, something between guilt and grief. "I thought if I stayed alive long enough, maybe I'd find a way back. But then I found you instead," he said, glancing up with a faint smile. "You sound disappointed," she teased gently. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, just surprised. I didn't expect my last mission to turn into this." Sarai looked away, pretending to adjust her blanket, but her heart fluttered at his words. "You risked everything for me." "That doesn't make sense," Corin shrugged. "War doesn't make sense either. Maybe saving someone does." The honesty in his tone disarmed her completely. She wanted to argue, to remind him they were supposed to hate each other. But every time she looked into his eyes, her defenses softened. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the wind and the faint pop of burning wood. Finally, Sarai whispered, "I used to think humans were monsters." Corin looked at her, amused. "You're not the first to say that. My commanders said you destroy planets without mercy, that you don't feel guilt." He gave a bitter smile. "We feel it. Every day. Maybe that's why we fight so hard. So the guilt doesn't swallow us whole." There was something raw in his voice. Something she hadn't heard before. She could sense the weight behind his words, the pain of watching people die, the helplessness that came with survival. "I saw your soldiers," she said quietly. "Some of them tried to save their own enemies before dying. I didn't understand it then." Corin looked down at the dirt, tracing lines with the tip of his knife. "Most of us don't fight because we hate. We fight because we're told it's the only way to protect what's left behind." Sarai nodded slowly. "I was told the same thing." Their eyes met across the fire. Two soldiers from opposite worlds, both carrying the same scars. She hesitated before speaking again. "Corin, when I fell, I thought I was going to die. I remember thinking maybe it's better this way. No more pain, no more running. And then you came." He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You're not the only one who thought that." Her heart ached. The pain in his eyes was quiet but deep. For the first time, she understood that he hadn't just saved her. He had been trying to save himself too. "I guess," she said softly. "We both needed someone to find us." Corin's lips curved into a faint smile. "Yeah, maybe the universe got tired of watching us suffer." They both laughed quietly, the sound blending with the soft hum of the wind. It was strange, laughter in the middle of ruins, but it felt right. After a moment, Corin looked at her with something like respect. "You're stronger than you think, Sarai." She shook her head. "No, I just didn't have a choice." "Having no choice and still standing, that's strength," he said simply. The words struck deep. She looked away, blinking back the tears that burned her eyes. He made it sound so easy, so human. As the day passed, they sat side by side, watching the distant smoke fade into the horizon. For the first time, Sarai didn't see Corin as a human soldier. She saw him as something more, someone broken yet still kind. Someone who refused to give up on life even when everything around him had fallen apart. When the sun began to set, painting the sky with red light, Sarai whispered, "Maybe we're both just trying to heal." Corin turned to her and smiled softly. "Then let's start there." And as the last light of day touched their faces, two enemies sat together, no longer divided by flags or orders, but joined by the quiet bond of understanding. The piece they had found was fragile, like glass resting on the edge of breaking. For 2 days, Sarai and Corin stayed near the burned wreckage, hiding from drones that scanned the skies. Each morning brought quiet fear, and each night brought small comfort. But that morning the wind carried a strange sound, low and heavy like a growl from the earth itself. Corin noticed it first. He was checking the perimeter when the dust began to swirl unnaturally, rising in twisting shapes. He squinted at the horizon, his face tightening. The sky, once pale gray, had turned dark red. "Storm's coming," he said sharply, "and not a normal one." Sarai looked up, sensing the shift in the air. Her sensitive skin tingled with static. "Radiation storm," she whispered, alarm filling her voice. "If we stay out here, it will burn through our suits." Corin quickly packed their few supplies. "We need shelter. There's an old bunker about half a mile east. I saw it yesterday." She tried to stand, but her legs still trembled from weakness. "I can make it," she said stubbornly, but her voice betrayed her exhaustion. He met her eyes firmly. "Then lean on me." The wind grew stronger, throwing dust and debris around them. The red haze deepened as the first waves of radiation began to glow faintly in the distance. Sarai could feel the heat rising under her skin. Every step became harder. The air felt thick and poisonous. Corin wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close as they fought through the storm. "Just keep moving," he shouted over the wind. "Almost there." Sarai wanted to answer, but her lungs felt like they were filled with fire. Her vision blurred and she stumbled. Corin caught her before she hit the ground. His face was pale, his eyes determined. "Don't stop," he urged. "We're not dying here." Together they moved through the choking air. The bunker loomed ahead, half buried in sand and ash, its metal door rusted but intact. The ground shook as another blast of heat rolled through the air. Corin reached the door and slammed his shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. Sarai coughed weakly, her strength fading fast. "It's sealed." "It's no use," Corin gritted his teeth. "No, we're getting in." With a growl, he drove his shoulder into the door again. It creaked, groaned, and finally gave way with a sharp metallic scream. The two of them stumbled inside as the wind howled behind them. Corin kicked the door shut and locked the seal. Inside, the bunker was dark and cold. The air smelled of rust and old metal. Corin fell to his knees, gasping for breath. Sarai slumped beside him, her whole body shaking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only their ragged breathing filled the silence. Then Corin turned to her. "You okay?" She looked at him. His face was blistered where the radiation had touched his skin. "You're hurt," she said in a trembling voice. He tried to wave it off, but his hand was trembling. "Just a little burn." Sarai reached for his arm, seeing the raw red marks spreading. "You carried me through that storm." "You shouldn't have done that." He gave a tired smile. "You said it yourself. I shouldn't have left you behind." Her chest tightened painfully. His skin was already heating up with fever. She knew what radiation poisoning looked like. It would spread quickly without treatment. "You're going to die if we don't treat it." He leaned his head against the wall, still smiling faintly. "You're safe. That's what matters." "No," she said sharply, grabbing his shoulders. "You can't say that." "You didn't save me just to die now." Her voice echoed in the bunker, full of panic and something deeper. Something she hadn't realized she felt until that moment. Corin's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You're strong, Sarai. You'll make it." She shook her head, her hands trembling. "Stop talking like that, please." The bunker lights flickered weakly as the storm raged outside. Sarai pressed her palm to his forehead. He was burning up. She could feel the radiation tearing through his body, and it terrified her. "You risked yourself again," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why do you keep doing that?" He gave a small, tired laugh. "Guess it's just what we humans do. We help, even when it hurts." She couldn't stop the tears from falling this time. She pressed her hand against his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingers. "You shouldn't have saved me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You should have saved yourself." His eyes met hers, dark, soft, full of something she couldn't name. "You don't get it, do you?" he murmured. "Saving you is saving myself." Her breath caught. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He was fading, his strength slipping away. Sarai leaned close, resting her forehead against his. "Then don't leave me," she whispered. "Not now." He gave a faint smile before his eyes closed. Outside, the storm screamed and tore across the land. But inside that small dark bunker, One alien held onto a dying human, two enemies who had become something far more powerful than allies. And as Sarai felt the heat of his fevered skin beneath her hands, she made a silent promise. She would not let him die. The storm raged above the bunker like an angry beast, shaking the earth with every gust. Inside, Sarai knelt beside Corin's still body. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale, and his lips dry. He was slipping away, and she could feel it, his life flickering like a dying flame. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She pressed her fingers to his wrist, feeling for a pulse. It was weak, almost gone. A rush of fear flooded through her. She had seen soldiers die before, but never like this. Never someone who had fought so hard to keep her alive. No, she whispered, voice trembling. You can't leave me. Not after everything. Her eyes filled with tears. She wasn't supposed to care. Her kind had always been taught that humans were dangerous, reckless, unpredictable. But this human had carried her through fire and storm. He had shared his food, his warmth, his laughter, and now he was dying because of her. Sarai clenched her fists, trembling with helplessness. Then deep in her mind she heard the faint echo of something she had once learned, an ancient practice of her species. The Sira Veil, the lifelink, a forbidden act. It allowed one being to share their energy, their essence, with another, but it came at a cost. Too much transfer could drain the giver to death. She looked at Corin's face, soft and peaceful even in pain. There was no choice. Sarai took a slow, shaking breath. You gave me your strength, she whispered. Now I'll give you mine. She placed both hands on his chest. A faint blue light began to glow from her palms, casting soft shadows on the metal walls. The air trembled around them as her energy flowed out. Warm, bright, alive. Her vision blurred, but she kept her focus. She could feel his heartbeat fluttering, fading, then slowly growing stronger beneath her hands. Each pulse drew a little more of her strength away, but she didn't stop. Come back, she whispered. Please, and come back. Her head throbbed and a sharp pain spread through her body, but she ignored it. The light from her hands grew brighter, too bright to look at directly. Her skin began to pale as the energy left her veins. In her mind, she could feel the connection forming between them, a thread of warmth tying their souls together. For a brief, beautiful moment, she saw flashes of his memories. A child laughing under the sun, a young soldier standing in the rain, watching ships leave for war, a man lonely but kind reaching out his hand to a stranger. Tears fell freely from her eyes. She understood him now. He had lost too much, given too much. That's why he had saved her, not out of duty, but because saving someone made him feel whole again. Her strength faltered. The light flickered. Just a little more, she whispered weakly. Her body trembled violently. The bunker's air grew heavy and cold. Still she held on, refusing to stop until she was sure. She could feel his heartbeat now, steady, strong, alive. When the last of her strength left her, she collapsed beside him, her hands falling limp. The blue light faded slowly, leaving the room dim and silent once more. Minutes passed. Then Corin stirred. He gasped sharply, eyes snapping open. His chest rose with a heavy breath, and he looked around in confusion. Sarai? He turned his head and saw her lying next to him, motionless. Panic shot through him. He crawled to her side, shaking her gently. Hey, Sarai! Wake up, she didn't move. Her skin was pale, her lips blue. For a moment he thought she was gone. And something inside him broke. He pulled her into his arms, voice cracking. No, you can't, please don't do this. Her hand twitched slightly, then rested weakly against his chest. Her eyes fluttered open, faint and tired. Corin, she whispered, her voice soft as air. He held her tighter, relief flooding his body. You're alive. Thank God you're alive. A faint smile touched her lips. You humans, she whispered, her words trembling. You always save others. I just wanted to return the favor. He looked at her, eyes burning with emotion. You shouldn't have risked yourself. Why would you do that? She gave a tiny laugh, almost a breath. Because I finally understand. Why you never give up. Corin brushed her hair back gently, tears slipping down his cheeks. You didn't have to prove anything. You already mattered. Her eyes softened, glowing faintly with fading energy. Then let's matter together. He nodded, his heart aching with love and gratitude. He lifted her closer, sharing his warmth, whispering, You're going to be okay. We both are. Outside, the storm began to fade. The red clouds broke apart, letting thin rays of light spill across the wasteland. And deep in that bunker, two lives, human and alien, lay intertwined, breathing in rhythm. Both broken once, but now healing together. The universe above them was vast and cruel, but in that small space something rare and precious had survived. Hope. When Sarai woke, the storm had passed. The air inside the bunker was still and heavy, carrying the faint metallic scent of survival. She blinked slowly, her body aching but alive. For a few seconds she didn't remember where she was, until she felt something warm against her hand. Corin was sitting beside her, his head resting against the wall. His eyes were closed, but his hand still held hers tightly, as if afraid she might slip away. The sight brought a faint smile to her tired face. "Still guarding me," she whispered softly. He stirred, blinking groggily. When his gaze fell on her, his whole face changed. "Sarai," he breathed, relief washing through his voice like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You're awake," she nodded weakly. "I told you. I wouldn't let you go." He gave a shaky laugh, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, you nearly killed yourself to prove it." Her smile widened faintly. "Seems fair." "You did the same." Corin chuckled quietly, then fell silent, his gaze softening. "You really scared me, you know. When I woke up and saw you like that." He swallowed hard. "I thought I lost you." "You didn't," she whispered. "Not yet." For a moment they just sat there, their hands still locked together. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they couldn't say out loud. Finally, Corin glanced at the door. "We should go. The storm's gone. We can find a way out of this wasteland." Sarai tried to move, but her body still felt weak. He helped her up gently, his arm steady around her shoulders. Step by step, they made their way to the door. When Corin unsealed it, a bright light spilled inside, forcing them both to squint. The world outside had changed. The sky was no longer red. It was pale gold, streaked with soft white clouds. The land still bore scars of destruction, but there was life too. Patches of green broke through the gray dust. Small flowers, fragile but brave, had begun to bloom. Sarai stared in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Corin smiled faintly. "Guess the planet decided to survive too." They stepped out into the sunlight. For the first time in weeks they felt warmth, not the harsh heat of radiation, but the gentle touch of life returning. They walked in silence for a while, heading toward the distant hills. Every step was a reminder of what they had endured, the pain, the fear, the moments when they had almost given up. Yet now those memories didn't feel heavy anymore. They felt meaningful. After some time, Sarai spoke softly. "When I first saw you, I thought you were my enemy. I was told humans were cruel, selfish, destroyers." Corin looked at her quietly. "And what do you think now?" She turned her face toward him, the sunlight catching in her eyes. "Now I know humans are something else. You break things, yes, but you also rebuild. You suffer, but you keep going. You fall, and still you find a way to stand again." He smiled, a bit embarrassed. "We're stubborn, I'll give you that." She laughed softly, a sound he realized he'd never heard from her before. It was light, pure, almost musical. "You're more than stubborn," she said gently. "You're hope made alive." Her words struck him deep, and for a long moment he didn't know what to say. Finally, he reached out, brushing his thumb over her hand. "Then I guess we both learned something." "What's that?" she asked. "That maybe healing doesn't just happen to the body," he said quietly. "It happens here." He touched his chest over his heart. "And you helped me remember that." Her gaze softened. "Then we healed each other." They walked until the sun began to set, painting the world in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, smoke rose from what looked like another settlement, maybe survivors. Corin pointed. "We could head there. Start over." Sarai nodded, though she looked uncertain. "Do you think they'll accept me?" "An alien." He met her eyes firmly. "If they don't, then they don't deserve either of us." Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "You really think like that?" "Yeah," he said with quiet conviction. "If there's going to be a future, it won't belong to one race. It'll belong to anyone who still believes in saving what's left." She stopped for a moment, looking up at the glowing sky. "Then maybe that's what we're meant to do, to remind both sides what life still means." Corin squeezed her hand. "Together?" "Together," she replied softly. They kept walking until the sun dipped below the horizon. The stars began to appear one by one, scattered like silver dust across the darkening sky. Sarai tilted her head back, gazing at them. Somewhere up there, her people were still fighting. Somewhere down here, humanity was still struggling to rebuild. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the quiet rhythm of their footsteps, the warmth of a shared heartbeat, and the promise that even after all the pain, kindness had survived. As the night embraced them, Sarai leaned against Corin's shoulder, her voice a gentle whisper. "You lifted me when I fell. You gave me back my life," he smiled, eyes fixed on the stars. "And you gave me back my reason to live." Above them, the universe stretched wide and endless, carrying their story into its infinite silence. One small tale of healing, of love, and of what it truly meant to be human.